Bullies picked the wrong target when they decided to mess with the quiet janitor's daughter. What they didn't know was that this seemingly fragile girl had been hiding a deadly secret for 8 years. Sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who choose to stay silent, and when pushed too far, they remind everyone exactly why respect should never be taken for granted. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Emma Chen moved through the corridors of Lincoln High School like morning mist, deliberately unnoticed and carefully invisible. At 17, she possessed the kind of understated presence that most teenagers would pay money to achieve. Her straight, black hair fell past her shoulders in a practical cut that required minimal maintenance, usually secured with simple elastic bands that had seen countless uses. She dressed in layers of neutral colors, oversized cardigans from discount stores paired with dark jeans that had been hemmed by her mother's careful hands. Her backpack was functional rather than fashionable, sturdy canvas that could withstand daily wear without complaint. Emma carried herself with perfect posture, though she rarely lifted her gaze above the polished linoleum floors that her father maintained with quiet pride every evening. Her dark eyes held depths that suggested wisdom beyond her years, but she kept them focused downward, watching for obstacles both literal and metaphorical. Lincoln High School sprawled across 15 acres in Riverside, California, a testament to suburban prosperity and educational ambition. Its modern architecture spoke of recent renovations funded by successful local businesses, with wide hallways designed to accommodate the steady flow of 800 students. Motivational banners hung from the ceiling, proclaiming messages about excellence and achievement that felt hollow to those who lived on the margins. The student body represented the economic diversity of Riverside itself, from the children of tech executives who lived in gated communities to the sons and daughters of service workers who kept the town functioning. Emma fell firmly into the latter category, a fact that seemed to define her existence within these walls more than any academic achievement or personal quality ever could. Most students at Lincoln knew Emma only peripherally, if at all. She was the quiet Asian girl whose father could be seen after hours pushing a maintenance cart through empty hallways, methodically cleaning whiteboards and emptying trash bins, with the thoroughness of someone who took pride in honest work. David Chen had been the head custodian at Lincoln for 6 years, ever since the family had moved to Riverside from San Francisco, seeking more affordable living and better opportunities. David worked with the kind of dignity that transformed menial labor into something approaching artistry. He knew every corner of the school, every stain that required special attention, every squeaky door that needed oil. Teachers respected him for his reliability and kindness, but to most students, he remained part of the background scenery, as invisible as the work he performed. Emma understood this dynamic perfectly and had learned to navigate it with careful precision. She had inherited her father's work ethic but applied it to her studies, maintaining a grade point average that would have shocked her classmates had they known. She completed assignments with the same methodical attention to detail that David brought to his custodial duties, though she rarely spoke up in class discussions or drew attention to her academic capabilities. The transition from San Francisco had been jarring in ways that still echoed through Emma's daily experience. In the city, their family had been part of a larger community where diversity was expected and celebrated. Here in Riverside, despite the town's growing multiculturalism, Emma often felt like an exhibit in a museum, studied from a distance but never truly understood. Their current home was a modest 2-bedroom apartment above Chen's Corner Market, owned by David's cousin who had sponsored their move south. The arrangement worked for everyone involved. David helped with maintenance around the store. Lisa worked shifts at Rosie's Diner on weekends to supplement their income. and Emma had learned to find beauty in simplicity. The apartment smelled of the jasmine tea her father brewed every evening, and the star anise her mother used in her weekend cooking. Family photos lined the small living room, documenting birthdays and holidays and small victories that meant everything to the people who lived them. Emma's academic certificates were displayed prominently, though she always felt embarrassed by the attention they drew to her achievements. What nobody at Lincoln High School knew, what Emma had never mentioned to a single classmate or teacher, was how she spent her afternoons after helping her father finish his custodial rounds. While other students were at football practice or drama club or hanging out at the mall, Emma walked 12 blocks downtown to a converted warehouse that housed Dragon's Den Martial Arts Academy. Master Rodriguez had been teaching traditional Shotokan karate for 37 years, first in Los Angeles and now in Riverside. His dojo occupied a space that had once been a furniture store, with hardwood floors worn smooth by decades of bare feet and high ceilings that echoed with the sharp sounds of training. Traditional weapons hung on the walls alongside tournament trophies and photographs of students who had gone on to compete at national levels. Emma had discovered the dojo by accident when she was 9 years old, wandering the streets while her parents worked late shifts. She had pressed her face against the window, fascinated by the precise movements and disciplined energy she witnessed inside. Master Rodriguez had noticed her daily visits and eventually invited her in to watch a class properly. The old man had recognized something in Emma's quiet intensity, a hunger for purpose that transcended her family's financial limitations. When David and Lisa expressed concern about the cost of lessons, Master Rodriguez had proposed a work-study arrangement. Emma could train in exchange for helping with basic maintenance and assisting with younger students. It was an offer that changed everything. For 8 years, Emma had trained with dedication that bordered on obsession. She absorbed every technique, every philosophy, every lesson that Master Rodriguez offered. Shotokan karate became her secret language, a way of understanding herself and the world that had nothing to do with social hierarchies or economic status. Her small frame had developed deceptive strength, her movements had acquired lethal precision, and her mind had learned the kind of focus that could stop time itself. Master Rodriguez often reminded his students that true martial arts were about avoiding conflict, not seeking it. The highest form of victory was achieving your goals without fighting, he would say. Emma had taken this lesson to heart, using her skills as a foundation for confidence rather than aggression. She had never needed to demonstrate her abilities. At school, never had reason to reveal the warrior hidden beneath her quiet exterior, but Lincoln High School was about to learn that some secrets, when finally revealed, can change everything. The social ecosystem at Lincoln High School operated with the brutal efficiency of natural selection, where status was currency and perception determined survival. Emma had spent 3 years learning to navigate these unforgiving waters by becoming essentially transparent, a strategy that had served her well until now. She understood instinctively that drawing attention in any form could be dangerous for someone in her position. The school's hierarchy was as rigid as any ancient caste system. At the top sat the athletes and their satellites, students whose families funded the new scoreboard and donated generously to booster clubs. Below them came the academically gifted, whose college prospects brought prestige to the school, followed by various social circles organized around shared interests or economic status. At the bottom existed what the guidance counselors euphemistically called at-risk students, though Emma knew the real risk was simply being poor in a place that celebrated wealth. Emma occupied a space even lower than the traditional bottom tier. She was the help's daughter, a category that existed outside the normal social framework entirely. Other students didn't bully her because she was foreign or small or quiet. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. They ignored her because acknowledging her existence would force them to confront uncomfortable truths about the service industry workers who made their comfortable lives possible. Tyler Brooks represented everything that Lincoln High School celebrated about itself. At 18, he stood 6 feet tall, with the kind of naturally athletic build that made coaches salivate and college recruiters take notice. His family had moved to Riverside 5 years earlier when his father purchased 3 local restaurants and a small hotel chain. Tyler drove a lifted Ford F-150 that cost more than most families spent on housing in a year, and he wore his privilege like armor, casual and unquestioned. Madison Pierce had cultivated her social media presence with the same dedication that Emma brought to martial arts. Her Instagram account boasted 12,000 followers who hung on her every outfit choice and weekend adventure. She possessed the kind of calculated beauty that required significant investment to maintain, with highlights that cost $300 every 6 weeks and a wardrobe that reflected careful study of celebrity fashion trends. Kyle Newman existed in Tyler's shadow by choice, understanding that proximity to power was preferable to the uncertainty of independence. He laughed at Tyler's jokes before they were finished and agreed with opinions before they were fully expressed. His own family background was solidly middle class, but he had learned to mimic the mannerisms of wealth well enough to pass inspection. Together, this trio formed the social nucleus around which much of Lincoln High School's student culture revolved. Their approval could elevate nobodies to temporary relevance, while their disapproval could exile former friends to social Siberia. They had never paid Emma any particular attention because she had never given them reason to notice her existence. Emma's father David arrived at Lincoln High School every afternoon at 3:30, 15 minutes after the final bell released students to their various destinations. He changed into his work uniform in a small custodial office that smelled of industrial cleaners and floor wax, transforming from concerned parent dropping off forgotten homework to invisible maintenance worker in the span of minutes. David took pride in his work in ways that would have surprised the students who saw him only as background scenery. He understood that maintaining a clean and functional educational environment was essential to learning, and he approached each task with the same attention to detail that he had once brought to his job as a restaurant cook in San Francisco. His relationship with the faculty was cordial and respectful. Teachers appreciated his reliability and his willingness to stay late when special events required extra cleaning. He never complained about students who left messes, understanding that teenagers often lacked the life experience to appreciate the effort required to maintain their environment. Emma often stayed after school to help her father, partly out of genuine desire to contribute and partly because the empty hallways provided peaceful transition time between her public school persona and her martial arts training. She would empty smaller trash bins while David handled the heavier work, and together they would methodically work through the building section by section. These afternoons had given Emma intimate knowledge of Lincoln High School's geography and rhythms. She knew which classrooms were used for tutoring sessions and which remained empty. She understood the building's acoustic properties, how sound carried through the ventilation system and which corridors offered the most privacy. This knowledge would prove invaluable in ways she could never have anticipated. During these cleaning sessions, Emma occasionally overheard conversations that revealed the true nature of her classmates' lives. Teachers discussing family problems. That explained certain students' behavioral issues. Coaches strategizing about recruitment and college scholarships. Administrators worrying about budget cuts and academic performance metrics. These glimpses behind the curtain had given Emma a more nuanced understanding of the adult world that most teenagers never accessed. The Chen family's evening routine reflected their shared commitment to education and mutual support. David would return home at 7 o'clock, shower off the day's work, and join Lisa and Emma for dinner around the small table that doubled as homework space and family conference room. Conversation flowed between English and Mandarin, with David often helping Emma with math concepts while Lisa shared stories from her shifts at the diner. Lisa Chen possessed the kind of practical wisdom that came from years of service industry work. She could read customer moods before they ordered and defuse conflicts before they escalated. Her English carried traces of the Guangzhou accent from her childhood, but her understanding of American social dynamics was sophisticated and hard-earned. Emma had inherited her mother's intuitive grasp of human behavior, though she applied it differently. Where Lisa used her insights to provide better customer service and earn larger tips, Emma used hers to remain invisible and avoid potential conflicts. Both approaches required constant vigilance and emotional intelligence that most people never developed. The family's financial situation was stable but precarious in the way that defined working-class life in expensive California. David's custodial position provided health insurance and steady income, while Lisa's diner work supplied the flexibility to handle family emergencies. They lived comfortably within their means, but unexpected expenses could destabilize their careful budget planning. For months, Emma understood these realities without needing explicit explanation. She had learned to appreciate material gifts while never expecting them, to find satisfaction in simple pleasures, while understanding that larger dreams required careful planning and sustained effort. This maturity had isolated her from many typical teenage concerns, creating additional distance between herself and her classmates. The Dragon's Den dojo had become Emma's true sanctuary, the one place where her identity wasn't defined by her family's economic status or her father's profession. Master Rodriguez treated all students with equal respect, measuring progress by dedication rather than financial contribution. The dojo's atmosphere fostered discipline and mutual support in ways that school social hierarchies actively discouraged. Emma's training partner was usually Maria Santos, a college freshman who worked part-time to pay for continued lessons. Maria had been training for 6 years and possessed natural leadership qualities that made her an excellent mentor for younger students. Their friendship existed entirely within the dojo's walls, but it provided Emma with proof that meaningful connections were possible when people focused on shared values rather than social status. The contrast between Emma's school life and dojo life had grown increasingly stark over the years. At Lincoln High, she moved carefully and spoke little, constantly aware of her precarious social position. At Dragon's Den, she moved with confidence and precision, her voice carrying authority when she helped teach children's classes. The difference was so complete that she sometimes felt like two entirely different people inhabiting the same body. This carefully maintained separation between her public and private selves had worked perfectly for 3 years. Emma had successfully avoided the attention of Tyler's crowd while developing skills that gave her quiet confidence. She had learned to find fulfillment in personal growth rather than social recognition, building strength that had nothing to do with other people's opinions. But high school ecosystems are inherently unstable, and the smallest disturbance can create ripple effects that transform everything. Emma Chen was about to discover that sometimes invisibility, no matter how carefully cultivated, cannot protect you from the chaos that others create. The transformation began on a Thursday morning in late October when Tyler Brooks arrived at school with visible scratches on his face and a bruised ego that demanded immediate attention. His lifted Ford F-150 had suffered significant damage the previous evening, when he had attempted to impress Madison Pierce by driving too fast through the Riverside Hills neighborhood after a house party. The truck had skidded on wet leaves, jumped a curb, and collided with an ornamental stone wall belonging to the Hendersons, a prominent local family. Tyler's father had spent the night managing the insurance implications and neighborhood politics of his son's reckless driving, while Tyler himself had been forced to endure a thorough dressing down about responsibility and consequences. The financial damage was manageable for the Brooks family, but the social embarrassment was not. Tyler needed to reassert his dominance in ways that would remind everyone of his untouchable status within the school's social hierarchy. Madison Pierce had witnessed the accident and captured portions of it on her phone, though she was smart enough not to post the footage publicly. Instead, she wielded the threat of social media exposure like a weapon, using Tyler's temporary vulnerability to solidify her own position within their relationship dynamic. She had spent years cultivating her online presence as the unofficial chronicler of Lincoln High School's social elite, and she understood that scandal could boost engagement numbers even more effectively than celebration. Kyle Newman sensed the shift in power dynamics immediately and adjusted his behavior accordingly. He became more aggressive in his loyalty displays, more willing to take risks that might restore Tyler's confidence and reputation. Kyle understood that his own social standing depended entirely on Tyler's continued success, and he was prepared to do whatever seemed necessary to maintain that crucial alliance. The morning after Tyler's accident, Emma Chen sat in her usual spot during first period study hall, working quietly on calculus problems while other students socialized or caught up on sleep. She had positioned herself at a corner table near the windows, where natural light made reading easier and the noise level remained manageable. Her routine was so established that she could navigate to this exact seat even if the classroom were completely dark. Tyler entered the study hall 15 minutes late, accompanied by Madison and Kyle in a formation that announced their intention to command attention. His face bore the unmistakable marks of his encounter with steering wheel and airbag, injuries that would have generated sympathy for almost any other student, but somehow made Tyler appear more dangerous rather than vulnerable. Mrs. Patterson, the study hall supervisor, was grading papers at her desk and barely looked up when the trio made their dramatic entrance. She had learned over 20 years of teaching that teenagers required careful management of attention. Giving too much could encourage disruption, while giving too little could lead to escalation. Tyler was smart enough to avoid direct confrontation with faculty, understanding that his parents' influence had limits. The three students settled at a table in the center of the room where their conversation would carry to the maximum number of listeners. Tyler needed an audience for whatever performance he was planning, and the study hall provided the perfect venue for establishing narratives that would spread throughout the school before lunch period. Madison immediately began documenting their presence with carefully staged photos, adjusting angles and lighting to minimize Tyler's visible injuries while maximizing the dramatic impact of his brooding expression. She understood that social media required constant content creation, and Tyler's temporary vulnerability provided excellent material if packaged correctly. Emma continued working on her mathematics, though she found herself unconsciously monitoring the conversation at Tyler's table. Years of invisibility had sharpened her observational skills, and she could sense when the social atmosphere contained potential danger for someone in her position. The energy around Tyler felt different today, more volatile and unpredictable. Kyle began the performance by loudly discussing weekend plans that involved expensive activities and exclusive venues, establishing the group's superior social status for anyone within hearing range. His voice carried the artificial enthusiasm of someone trying too hard to project normalcy, and Emma recognized the signs of forced confidence that often preceded aggressive behavior. Madison contributed commentary about various classmates' recent social media posts, offering critiques and observations that walked the fine line between humor and cruelty. Her analysis was sophisticated enough to demonstrate her social intelligence while maintaining plausible deniability about any malicious intent. She possessed the kind of calculated mean girl skills that made her both admired and feared. Tyler remained mostly silent during these opening exchanges, allowing his friends to warm up the audience while he surveyed the room for potential targets. His gaze moved systematically from table to table, evaluating students based on criteria that had nothing to do with academic ability or personal character. He was hunting for weakness, for vulnerability that could be exploited to restore his damaged ego. Emma felt Tyler's attention settle on her before she looked up from her calculus problems. Some primitive survival instinct triggered a warning that made her skin prickle with awareness. She had spent 3 years successfully avoiding this exact moment, but her luck had finally run out. Tyler Brooks had noticed her existence, and experience suggested that such attention rarely led to positive outcomes for students in her social position. Tyler's assessment of Emma was swift and merciless. He saw a small Asian girl wearing clothes that marked her as economically disadvantaged, sitting alone with academic materials that suggested she took school seriously. More importantly, he saw someone who appeared incapable of fighting back. Effectively, someone whose family lacked the social connections necessary to create consequences for those who targeted her. Madison followed Tyler's gaze and immediately understood his intentions. Her influencer instincts recognized the potential for content creation, for drama that could boost her engagement numbers while reinforcing their group's social dominance. She began positioning her phone discreetly, preparing to capture whatever performance Tyler was planning. Kyle simply waited for his cue, ready to provide whatever support Tyler's ego required. He had participated in enough of these social dominance displays to understand his role without explicit instruction. His job was to amplify Tyler's authority while providing backup intimidation if the target showed any signs of resistance. Emma felt the weight of their collective attention like physical pressure. Her martial arts training had taught her to recognize aggression before it became overt, and every instinct screamed warnings about the approaching confrontation. But her carefully constructed invisibility strategy offered no protocols for this situation. She had spent 3 years avoiding attention, not preparing to handle it. The study hall contained approximately 30 students, most of whom were now unconsciously aware that some form of entertainment was about to unfold. High school students possessed finely tuned social antennae that detected conflict before it became obvious, and the room's energy had shifted in ways that everyone could feel, but few could articulate. Mrs. Patterson remained focused on her grading, either genuinely unaware of the developing situation or strategically choosing to ignore warning signs that had not yet crossed into territory requiring intervention. Teachers learned to pick their battles carefully, and premature action could sometimes create problems that might otherwise resolve themselves. Tyler rose from his seat with deliberate slowness, every movement calculated to project confidence and authority. His height advantage became more pronounced when he stood, and he used his physical presence like a weapon, understanding that intimidation often worked more effectively than actual violence. Madison and Kyle flanked him automatically, creating a formation that maximized their group's imposing presence. Emma's heartbeat accelerated, but her breathing remained controlled. 8 years of martial arts training had taught her to manage fear without allowing it to dictate her responses. Master Rodriguez's voice echoed in her memory, reminding her that true strength came from inner calm rather than external aggression. But she had never been tested in circumstances like these, where the consequences extended far beyond the dojo's controlled environment. The approach was theatrical, designed to draw maximum attention from their audience while building psychological pressure on their target. Tyler understood that effective bullying required spectacle, that private intimidation lacked the social reinforcement that made public humiliation so devastating. He needed witnesses to validate his power and spread word of his restored dominance. Emma closed her calculus book and placed her hands flat on the table surface, a gesture that appeared passive but actually represented her assuming a ready position. Her training had taught her to prepare for conflict while maintaining the appearance of cooperation, to gather information before committing to any course of action. The distance between Tyler's table and Emma's corner was perhaps 20 feet, but he covered it slowly, allowing tension to build with each step. Madison documented the approach with her phone camera, capturing angles that would tell the story she wanted while avoiding footage that might create legal complications later. Kyle matched Tyler's pace, maintaining formation while scanning for potential interference. Mrs. Patterson finally looked up from her papers, sensing the classroom's changed atmosphere. But Tyler had not yet crossed any lines that required immediate intervention, and she hesitated to act on intuition alone. The moment balanced on a knife's edge between manageable teenage drama and something far more serious. Emma Chen sat perfectly still, watching Tyler Brooks approach with the calm intensity of a coiled spring. 3 years of invisibility were about to end, and 8 years of secret training were about to face their first real test. The quiet janitor's daughter was about to discover whether her hidden strength was sufficient to protect her from the storm that Tyler's damaged ego had. Unleashed, Tyler stopped directly beside Emma's table, positioning himself to loom over her seated form while ensuring maximum visibility for their growing audience. His physical presence was intimidating by design, the result of years spent learning to use size and privilege as weapons against those who couldn't fight back effectively. Madison positioned herself at an angle that would capture Emma's face while keeping Tyler's injuries minimally visible in any footage she might post later. Emma looked up slowly, meeting Tyler's gaze with steady, dark eyes that betrayed none of the calculations racing through her mind. Master Rodriguez had taught her that the first moments of any confrontation determined everything that followed, that appearing weak invited aggression while appearing too strong could escalate situations. Unnecessarily, she needed to project calm confidence without triggering Tyler's already damaged ego. Tyler had expected immediate submission, the downcast eyes and nervous fidgeting that usually accompanied his attention. Instead, he found himself looking into eyes that held depths he couldn't fathom, a composure that seemed almost adult in its steadiness. The unexpected resistance irritated him, suggesting that this target might require more effort than he had anticipated. Madison sensed Tyler's momentary uncertainty and moved to provide support, her voice carrying the false sweetness that marked her most dangerous moods. She had perfected the art of verbal assault disguised as concern, delivering devastating attacks, while maintaining plausible deniability about malicious intent. Her social media success had taught her that controversy generated engagement, and she needed content that would distinguish her posts from countless other teenage influencers. Kyle remained silent but alert, ready to provide physical backup if Tyler's psychological intimidation proved insufficient. He had learned to read Tyler's moods with survival precision, understanding that his own social standing depended entirely on properly supporting his friend's dominance displays. The scratches on Tyler's face suggested vulnerability that needed immediate correction through successful bullying. Mrs. Patterson watched the developing situation with growing concern, recognizing the signs of escalating tension even if she couldn't hear the specific words being exchanged. 20 years of classroom experience had taught her to distinguish between normal teenage social interaction and something more dangerous, but intervention required careful timing to be effective rather than counterproductive. Emma remained seated, her posture relaxed but ready, hands resting calmly on the table surface in a position that appeared passive while actually preparing her for rapid movement if necessary. 8 years of martial arts training had taught her to manage adrenaline without allowing it to cloud her judgment, to maintain awareness of multiple attackers while appearing focused on only one. Tyler's opening attack was predictably cruel, designed to establish dominance while providing entertainment for their audience. He referenced Emma's father's profession with the casual dismissiveness that marked his class privilege, suggesting that custodial work was somehow shameful rather than essential. His voice carried just enough volume to reach nearby tables without alerting Mrs. Patterson to the situation's seriousness. Madison immediately amplified Tyler's attack with observations about Emma's clothing and appearance, delivered in tones that suggested helpful advice rather than deliberate cruelty. She had mastered the art of bullying disguised as concern, creating plausible deniability while inflicting maximum psychological damage. Her phone captured Emma's reactions for potential social media content, though she was careful to frame shots that wouldn't obviously identify her as the aggressor. Emma absorbed their verbal assault without visible reaction, her martial arts training providing emotional discipline that surprised her attackers. Master Rodriguez had taught her that words possessed power only when the target gave them permission. To wound, that true strength came from inner certainty rather than external validation. She understood that reacting emotionally would give Tyler exactly what he needed to feel powerful again. Kyle contributed commentary designed to reinforce Tyler's dominance while demonstrating his own loyalty, though his words lacked the creative cruelty that Tyler and Madison delivered so effortlessly. He was a follower by nature, more comfortable, amplifying others' aggression than initiating his own attacks. His role was to provide backup intimidation and audience validation for Tyler's performance. The study hall's atmosphere had shifted noticeably, with conversations quieting as students sensed drama unfolding. High school social dynamics operated on gossip and spectacle, and everyone understood instinctively that they were witnessing something significant. Some students appeared uncomfortable with the obvious bullying, but none showed signs of intervening on Emma's behalf. Emma's silence began to frustrate Tyler, who needed emotional reactions to fuel his psychological dominance. Bullying required cooperation from victims, some sign that the attacks were landing effectively. Emma's calm composure suggested either stupidity or hidden strength, and Tyler's experience told him that stupidity rarely presented itself so confidently. Madison escalated her attack by referencing Emma's family's financial situation with false sympathy, suggesting that perhaps charity organizations could help with clothing and school supplies. Her words were crafted to sound helpful while actually highlighting Emma's economic vulnerability, demonstrating the sophisticated cruelty that had made her social media presence so successful. Tyler moved closer, invading Emma's personal space, while maintaining the pretense of friendly conversation. His physical intimidation was subtle enough to avoid teacher intervention while creating maximum psychological pressure. He had learned through years of practice exactly how far he could push before crossing lines that would trigger adult consequences. Emma's breathing remained steady despite the escalating pressure, her martial arts training providing tools for managing stress that her attackers couldn't comprehend. She had spent countless hours learning to maintain clarity under pressure, to observe multiple opponents while appearing focused on only one. The situation was dangerous, but it wasn't yet beyond her ability to manage. Kyle positioned himself to block potential escape routes, understanding his role in the group's intimidation strategy without requiring explicit instruction. His movements appeared casual, but they effectively trapped Emma at her corner table, while providing Tyler with confidence that their target couldn't simply leave. The psychological pressure was building systematically, designed to force submission through overwhelming presence. Mrs. Patterson finally looked up from her grading with obvious concern, recognizing that the interaction at Emma's table had moved beyond normal social boundaries. But the students had been careful to avoid obvious violations that would require immediate intervention, and she hesitated to act on intuition alone. Teachers who interrupted teenage drama unnecessarily often created larger problems than they solved. Madison continued documenting the encounter with her phone, capturing footage that could be edited to tell whatever story she chose later. Social media success required constant content creation, and authentic drama generated more engagement than staged scenarios. She was building material for posts that would reinforce her status as Lincoln High School's premier social chronicler. Emma recognized that the situation was approaching a critical threshold where continued passivity would be interpreted as weakness, potentially encouraging escalation. Master Rodriguez had taught her that sometimes demonstrating strength was necessary to prevent worse conflicts, that showing capability could deter aggressors more effectively than continued submission. Tyler's frustration with Emma's composure was becoming visible, his need for emotional reaction driving him toward more aggressive tactics. Psychological bullying worked best against targets who provided the fear and submission that bullies needed to feel powerful. Emma's steady calm was undermining his entire approach, forcing him to consider physical intimidation despite the increased risks. The study hall's energy had reached a tipping point where everyone understood that something significant was about to happen. Students had stopped pretending to work, their attention focused entirely on the drama unfolding at Emma's table. Some appeared uncomfortable with the obvious bullying, but high school social dynamics discouraged intervention that might redirect aggression toward would-be helpers. Emma's hands remained relaxed on the table surface, but her muscles were coiled, with readiness that years of training had made automatic. She understood that Tyler's damaged ego required some form of victory, but she was no longer willing to provide it through submission. The quiet janitor's daughter was preparing to reveal capabilities that would shock everyone present. Madison sensed the approaching climax and adjusted her phone position to capture whatever was about to unfold, her influencer instincts recognizing the potential for viral content. She had no idea that her documentation was about to record something far more dramatic than typical high school bullying, something that would change Lincoln High School's social dynamics permanently. Tyler took another step closer, his physical intimidation becoming more overt as his psychological tactics failed to produce the submission he required. His damaged ego demanded some form of victory, and Emma's continued composure was making him increasingly desperate for any sign that his attacks were having their intended effect. Emma looked up at Tyler one final time, her dark eyes holding depths that he was only beginning to comprehend. 8 years of hidden training were about to surface, and the quiet girl who had spent 3 years being invisible was about to remind everyone that some people choose silence, not from weakness, but from strength. Tyler reached down to slam his hand on Emma's calculus book, the sharp sound echoing through the study hall like a gunshot. The aggressive gesture was designed to startle her into the fearful submission he desperately needed, but Emma's reaction was nothing like what he expected. Instead of flinching or cowering, she moved with fluid precision that seemed to slow time itself. Emma's right hand intercepted Tyler's descending wrist with a grip that made him gasp in surprise. Her fingers found pressure points that Master Rodriguez had taught her years ago, applying just enough force to demonstrate control without causing permanent damage. Tyler's eyes widened as he realized he couldn't pull free from her seemingly delicate grasp. The transformation in Emma's posture was immediate and complete. She rose from her chair with the flowing grace of someone who had spent thousands of hours perfecting movement, her small frame suddenly radiating the kind of controlled power that made the surrounding air feel electric. The quiet janitor's daughter had vanished, replaced by someone Tyler couldn't comprehend. Madison's phone captured every second as Emma spoke in a voice that carried clearly through the silent study hall. She explained calmly that Tyler had made a fundamental error in his target selection, that assuming weakness based on economic status or family profession demonstrated the kind of ignorance that created dangerous miscalculations. Her words were precise and devastating, delivered without anger or malice. Emma released Tyler's wrist and took a single step back, her stance shifting into something that made Kyle instinctively retreat. She moved like water, each adjustment flowing naturally into the next, while maintaining perfect balance and readiness. Her hands remained loose at her sides, but everyone present could sense the lethal capability they contained. Tyler's face flushed red as he realized the entire study hall was watching his humiliation unfold. He lunged forward with the wild aggression of someone who had never faced real resistance, his size and anger driving him toward a confrontation he was completely unprepared for. Emma's response was swift and surgical. She sidestepped Tyler's clumsy charge with minimal movement, using his own momentum against him while delivering a precise strike to his solar plexus that dropped him to his knees. The technique was textbook Shotokan, executed with the kind of perfection that only years of dedicated training could produce. Tyler gasped for air while Emma stood over him, completely composed. Madison continued filming as Kyle rushed to help, his friend only to find himself facing Emma's unwavering gaze. The look in her eyes stopped him cold, conveying without words that his intervention would be both unwelcome and unsuccessful. Kyle had never encountered this kind of quiet confidence before, and his own privileged background had left him unprepared for genuine confrontation. Mrs. Patterson finally moved from her desk, but by the time she reached Emma's table, the situation was already resolved. Tyler was slowly getting to his feet, his face burning with embarrassment, while Emma calmly gathered her books. The entire confrontation had lasted less than 2 minutes, but it had fundamentally altered Lincoln High School's social landscape. Emma addressed Tyler one final time, her voice carrying the kind of authority that made everyone listen. She explained that respect was earned through character rather than inherited through wealth, that true strength came from protecting others rather than intimidating them. Her words carried the wisdom of someone far older than 17, backed by capabilities that no one had suspected. As Emma walked toward the door, students who had never spoken to her before nodded with newfound respect. The quiet girl, who had been invisible for 3 years, was now impossible to ignore, her revealed strength creating ripples that would spread throughout the school within hours. Tyler Brooks remained on his knees, his damaged ego now completely shattered by someone he had considered beneath his notice. Madison stared at her phone footage in amazement, realizing she had captured something far more significant than typical high school drama. The video would indeed go viral, but not in the way any of them had expected. Instead of documenting Tyler's dominance, it would showcase Emma's incredible restraint and skill, turning the janitor's daughter into an overnight legend. Emma Chen walked out of the study hall with her head held high, her secret finally revealed, but her dignity completely intact. The girl who had chosen invisibility for 3 years had demonstrated that sometimes the most dangerous people are those who have nothing to prove and everything to protect. Lincoln High School would never underestimate the quiet ones again. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.